Hello, my name is Simon. Welcome to Why Is That, a free speech platform where we explore big ideas and the controversies of our time.
Hello, beloveds, and welcome back to another episode of Why Is That? Today we're looking at education. We put children through 13 years of education and they come out without basic life skills. Why is that? And then we blame the schools and not the parents. To talk about this, we have Michael Loretz in the studio. By phone actually, has over 2 decades in the classroom and a master's in education, so both an expert in theory and practice. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Simon.
So, in your many years of education, have you, how should I say this? Have you had parents be critical of the school rather than the schools should be teaching them something that the parents should be teaching them?
Well, I suppose that in any school there's always going to be some parents who are not engaged with what the school is doing, and that can manifest itself in various ways. So, there are parents whose aspirations match up with the aspirations of the school, and usually things go quite swimmingly well if that's the case, but often parents' aspirations for their children don't match that of the school, and when that happens, then often what can happen is that rather than confronting the school or having a conversation or really getting down to the nitty-gritty of what's happening, some parents will disengage from what the school is doing, and that's where I think things can go quite drastically wrong. Those conversations about what a parent wants for their child and how the school can help achieve those aspirations, in my experience, have usually been stilted or hard to hold, especially when the values of the parents and the values of the school don't match.
Because there's 2 aspects to it, isn't there? There is, that the child is very precious to the parents, but they hand them over to the school in a one-size-fits-all, with, especially with state schooling, state curriculum, it's pretty standard.
Yeah, that's right, and I think in New Zealand we suffer from that. It's an historic relic, really, from the past where schooling was designed for an industrial age. Children come through, they get processed for jobs that everybody understands are there and have a particular character. But what I think schools haven't done over the last 20, 30 years is changed with the times. They've remained as a sort of a process to churn out a particular type of person with particular preset knowledge for particular jobs, and the realities of life in the 21st century is actually quite different. The aspirations of parents can be quite complex. We're a much more multicultural, much more multi-religious society than we used to be, and jobs have changed. We don't know what the jobs of the 21st century are going to look like. Often when a child enters their schooling, once they come out, the job situations are quite different, and things are changing very, very quickly. So I suppose this one-size-fits-all problem has sort of become worse and worse. It used to be you could get away with it to some extent, that there were pathways for people who failed school as well. They could go into the trades, etc. Whereas nowadays, we really need every one of our kids to succeed in some way and to become cultural citizens, to contribute competently with many different types of literacies.
Because you have a whole philosophy, we'll get onto this in a moment, about fostering the individual and, trying to teach to where the student is at, and foster them. But the second bit, when we're talking about life skills, it's like through 13 years of education, don't know how to change a tire, don't know how to do something like grow a, vegetable garden, don't have a basic certificate like in Microsoft Word or something, like some courses offer, and then people going, the school should teach that. But why aren't parents teaching them? there's been this big aggregation of responsibility. Just go, the schools will do it.
Well, that's right. I think parents usually know their kids reasonably well, and they know what their interests are. I don't think the solution is as simple as saying every school should teach children to change a tyre per se, although it's a useful skill for a lot of people. But I do think that there needs to be some very clear conversations between schools and parents, and in fact are working together, where the school sees its role as helping the parents to educate the child. And that, I think, has a much bigger chance of working from the point of view that children are different. They're not all the same as each other. They do have different interests. They'll thrive in certain lines of inquiry, whereas other ones will lead to dead ends. And forcing one mode on a child, forcing some content on a child, isn't going to really be engaged with by the child or the family unless they're really sort of hooking into where that child is at and working maybe a step ahead of where they're at, so that they're always feeling challenged to do something useful. And really it's, it doesn't matter what that thing is, because life is so diverse and so wide-scoped, especially in our times. There isn't really a set of things that we can sort of pinpoint and put a ring fence around and say these are the things that every single person needs to learn in terms of content. Obviously, in terms of skills, yes, we need everyone to be able to read, to be able to be fluent in their language, to be able to operate well in their culture. Because we know that if we don't have those things, then success in any realm is going to be difficult. But the role of the school is beyond teaching just to read, write, and to be. The role of the school is to assist the parents in raising a child to their fullest potential, which is another story altogether.
Indeed. We were talking before about how in New Zealand, especially with the multicultural society, and this is the same with all other places around the world, there are small cultural groups that can't just go back to the home country to learn the culture, and they want to maintain the culture, but, have to send their kids to state schools. And can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think as human beings we have a range of different communities where we feel comfortable and where we thrive, and sometimes those communities are culturally based, sometimes they're religious communities, and those communities bring something really precious to the society. So, for example, I was talking to a group of people from Niue who were saying how difficult it is to keep their language alive. Now, the Niuean language is a beautiful language, and it has insights and concepts in it that other languages don't have. And yet, it's very difficult for the families to maintain that language and pass it on to the next generation when their children are forced to go to the state school where they may be the only Niueans there. And it's unreasonable to say to a school, well, you need to teach Niuean because you've got one family of Niueans. So I think that type of thing highlights that the aspirations of parents maybe can't be met under the models that we've got right at the moment, and that in actual fact there could be some legislative change in the environment so that people within their legitimate communities with legitimate learning needs can band together to actually set up a school and to have it funded, because it is for the good of society as well as for the good of the families. So that those treasures of culture can be handed down through the generations as what most of these families will hold as their most important and valued gift to their children.
Because what I wanted to touch on that is when we were talking about the one-size-fits-all, when I was in the classroom, I found schools that didn't stream sort of to ability. They just put randomly in a class, basically you were teaching to the slower students, and the more gifted students were bored out of their brains, and it wasn't challenging the mid-level, but schools, that broke into streams could teach to, ability and foster talents. But I think one of the problems is the state will do it one size fits all.
Yes, well, even when schools do stream, it may be a bit of an illusion. For example, first of all, what is being gifted and talented? What is it that we're looking for when we say we're going to put you guys together in a class? Is it that your parents have a particular type of aspiration for you that may not be valued in another family? And if it is, then is it a sidestep to say we're going to treat all you guys the same while we treat all the other guys differently? And in which case you're really still perpetuating a one-size-fits-all sort of model. What I think schools need to do is more complex than streaming, although streaming can have its benefits. What I propose that schools need to do is to really come to understand children as people. What are their strengths? Where are their gaps? What would it really take to work with that family to make sure that child flourishes to the best of their ability? And that requires quite a lot of extra work. It requires a totally different attitude often. So, for example, this one-size-fits-all thing can, in fact, hamstring and isolate families. So, for example, you might have a family living out a zone that has multiple children, and the milieu of the early morning is such that it's difficult sometimes for every single child to get to school on time, right on the bell. And the school might have a one-size-fits-all policy where people arriving 2 minutes after the bell get a 10-minute detention after school. And you sort of think, well, fair enough because it's consequences, but they may not have any control over that. It's not necessarily that child's issue, yet that child pays a price and can feel quite hard done by at the end of the day, feeling that the school is not on their side. Now, that type of thing is common and it happens day in, day out, where schools sort of put forward an expectation that isn't actually meeting the family's expectation. And so at the end of the day, parents can feel like this school isn't something that's doing my child good. I'm not going to work in well with the school. I'll take every opportunity I can to snatch my child back from this place that doesn't treat my child well. And I think we have to break through that somehow, because there are communities where kids have huge potential, really not flourishing in schools because of the fact that there's this mismatch of expectation, this mismatch of hearts, really. I think schools and parents have to be of the same heart, have the same aspirations for children, and I think the schools need to be secondary to the parents in that.
The schools do try to foster, their view of success, and they generally want that for the students, but there is a lot of wasted talent and different expectations from the school, the parents, the children. I was thinking of a example from Sweden where a family had been living in America and had come back to Sweden, and the mother boasted about how well her child was doing in math, and apparently culturally you don't do that. If you were saying, oh, they're really good at drama or whatever, more the arts, that's fine. Mm-hmm. In most Western countries, it'd be like, oh, drama, what a waste of time. But you've got people like philosopher Stefan Molyneux, who did drama, and he brings that to his presentations, and it makes it even more powerful. And maybe, at times that's just phases people need to go through.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's very, very difficult for anyone sitting within their own cultural paradigm to imagine what it's like in a different one. And I think schools have a certain type of person comes through teaching training colleges. They're usually people with okay marks, but not wonderful marks, because they sort of come to teaching as a second choice often. And usually they're of a particular cultural mindset, and it's very difficult for them to really see the values of another mindset. And so I think that it is knocking and scratching on the surface of the problems that we have in education right at the moment. How do middle class, above average academic students turn to teachers understand what it's like being in a family that doesn't value that, and may have aspirations and will have aspirations for their children that are very laudable, but speaking highly of one thing and lowly of another is a cultural standpoint. So it's very difficult to imagine what the lives of others are like, and to try and hook into what's going to really motivate them.
On that point, I know some people who are the black sheep of the family for running away and joining the armed forces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there are some people like in New Zealand, and there are plenty of them overseas. Their military-style academy, school for children to go to. Sometimes people in the armed forces, want to send their kids there because they're an armed forces family.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. You hear the calls to talk back, where people will say, if we just bring back the military service, it'll whip these kids into shape, and it'll give them something to do, and they'll learn life skills, and it'll be fantastic. And sure, that will work for a particular group of kids, for a particular group of families, where perhaps they have a physical learning style. They learn by doing, where they they have an interest in things technical. That could work, and it does work for a lot of people, but it won't work for everybody. And so really, I think in terms of teaching and learning, teachers need to be more intelligent. They need to intelligently look at the realities of a complex situation in every single case. You have to actually consider, as I said before, the students before you not as your blank starting material, but as a complex member of the society already, who has a will, who has aspirations, who has interests, and those things need to be the starting point. And so it takes a profound respect and a profound intelligence on the part of teachers to really educate, especially where we have students who at the moment are falling through the cracks.
From my time in the classroom, and I suppose at school, and you may or may not agree with this, but you come across teachers who are like, you should not be here. It's like, to the students, obey, just do as I tell you.
That's right, yeah.
And they're never happy classrooms, they're never productive. You're just trying to appease, and sometimes not even then, just somebody you think is a complete dick.
Well, that's right, and that's the disengagement problem that I was alluding to before. I've worked in various secondary schools around Auckland, and one of them had a culture of that very much firmly in place, where the expectation from every student was basically compliance. And the way in which the interactions took place between teachers and students, you could just see it walking through the playground. You'd have a teacher sort of yell at a child to pull their socks up from 100 metres away. No greeting, no treating that person as a human being, just, boy, yes, you, pull up your socks, sort of thing. And you sort of think, well, if somebody addressed you like that in the store, or in any other sort of aspect of your life, you would think just that. You'd think, this person is an exceptionally rude, aggressive person who doesn't have my best interests at heart. And one thing that I've worked in over the years is educating teachers, especially as a deputy principal. One thing I know is that people will not learn from somebody they don't believe has their best interests at heart. they will simply work against those people. So if you ask a group of people, think back to the best teacher you ever had, think back to a person who really made a difference in your life, who was the person who really enthused you about education, and you ask what they remember about that person. It's not the content of what they taught you. Usually what people will say is, I remember they were kind. I remember that they, treated me well. I remember that they had a particular way about them that I could really relate to. They had a sense of humour or something. But it's about the connection between, you and that person that usually made them the best teacher in the world. And that, I think, is missed often by schools who haven't moved from the models of the 1960s into something that's a bit more human.
What do you think, when I was going through Teachers College, I liked the idea of gender-specific education, because it seemed like boys and girls learned in very different ways. I remember I didn't have a great time in primary school years when I had female teachers, but I was sent to a very traditional all-boys grammar school, and the teachers were hard on us, but we kind of loved it, actually, in hindsight.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. What I do believe about that is I think that boys need to be taught by men at least some of the time, and most ideally half of the time. If not more, because boys will learn how to be good men from having good men as their role models. We have a society at the moment where lots of children are being raised by women in their families. There's no men. We have a crisis of marriage in our society, where people are viewing marriage more as a convenience for whatever relationship happens to be tickling their fancy right at the time, instead of having a permanence to it and an idea that every child needs a mother and a father, so that they can understand what good men, what good women are like, and the sacrificial love that they can give. And then they come to school and they've got female teachers all the way through from primary to secondary, often because we haven't fostered a balance in the teaching profession. So I do think that children are missing out on that gender balance. There has been a feminisation of the curriculum where there's a lack of competition, and I think boys will often hook into that idea of excelling and comparing themselves and knowing their position. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's highly motivating for boys. That tends to have been removed by a largely female teaching profession. As for gender separated classes, I think that is something that really comes down to the child and the family and their aspirations for the child and the family. So I think that co-educational education can work, and it does suit some children, but I think single-sex education can work as well, and I think it's something that the parents need to decide. I certainly think there are some things that should be taught separately, sexuality education for a start, but personally I believe schools really shouldn't have their hand in that. I think that should be in the realm of the parents, and that the parents, if they need support, should have places to go to get it on those things. But I think there needs to be a profound respect for the aspirations of the parents in that area.
We're coming up to the last 5 minutes of the show, just about. Can we talk a bit about maybe homeschooling, maybe not relying on schools, and what sort of things are involved in that?
Well, homeschooling, I think, is perhaps the most natural way to educate children in a family. The family is by far and away the primary milieu for education anyway. But homeschooling really can only be done by families who have the ability to provide for their families and have the time and the knowledge and the support networks to make a good go of that. Most parents, I think, need assistance with educating their kids, and that's fine. But what we have at the moment is a situation where there's sort of all or nothing. You can homeschool your children with no support, no help, or you can send them to a school where the school makes all the decisions and you're sort of cut out of the education of your child altogether. And there doesn't seem to be a sort of healthy middle ground where the parents are respected as the primary educators of the children, but the family is really the primary context for learning, but that the parents need the help and support of professionals so that the complexity of the curriculum can be put before the children, and the children have a chance to engage with, really getting to the height of their potential academically. So, I sort of think that we lack, a middle ground in education. We sort of have the sort of communist model running with state schooling, or you can have, complete control if you want, but then you've got to resource it all yourself and have, very little support unless you can muster it up. I think ideally communities should raise children, families primarily, extended families and communities, and that teachers should be hired to assist those people to do it the way that they see fit.
Because that's more a natural way of doing it, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
Well, we see, going back to Scandinavia, as everyone likes to use that for examples, it's quite scary about how they've banned homeschooling, and you will send your children to our schools and they will be taught this curriculum if you like it or not. It's very disrespectful to families, and as we were talking about the aspirations parents have for their children, and doesn't take into account.
Well, that's right, and I think that parents actually do need to step up to the mark and claim the education of their children back. It can be a scary thing for parents to do, but there is help. There are organisations that believe what I'm saying firmly. One of them is Family Life International in New Zealand. I work for them currently. And people might be interested to know that we have an amazing pro-family conference coming up on the 23rd to the 25th of September at the Bruce Mason Centre in Takapuna for families really to learn how they can take the education of their children back, how they can protect them from, the threats to the family like pornography, and have really solid sort of grounding for being motivated to form good families of their own when they get to it.
Yeah, because that's another, just coming to the very end, but sexuality being taught in schools is quite a big hot button topic, especially, when the schools are handing out contraception and arranging abortions for, for teen girls without their parents' knowledge. And
and I think that's the ultimate abuse of parental mission, is to take a decision like, a life-saving decision, a life-changing decision, rather, like abortion, off the family and to carry that out secretly, and then often to lie to the family about what's happened, so they don't even have the chance to sort of deal with the aftermath, which can be devastating. It's the ultimate abuse. I think that schools have sort of got to the stage where they see themselves as almost owners of their students, and that the parents need to be sort of put to one side, and the students need protection from their parents, away from their parents. Really a disintegration of the family at its highest level. The violence of abortion on the unborn child, the violence of abortion on the girl who's taken from their safety networks and their family secretly, so has to deal with the whole thing alone. So I do think that there needs to be legislative change there. Our children are not being well served when those sorts of things go on.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And we'll have you on at the show again sometime, hopefully in the future, and we can talk about these things more.
Very good. Good to talk.
Okay, thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Tom.
Join me, Simon and guests, 104.6 FM at 3:15 on Tuesdays for my show, Why Is That? Or anytime online at